This program was brought to you by Organo Gold. Organo Gold is a health and wellness company that provides healthy coffees, teas, and chocolate. All one has to do is consume the available coffee, teas, chocolate, and other products to get all the available benefits. One can also share these products with others to help them improve their health as well.
And now, Fairfax Breakfast Club with your host, Basil Lemba.
Welcome to the Fairfax Breakfast Club show. My name is Basil Lemba and I will be your host. The Fairfax Breakfast Club is a weekly program in which we bring to you valuable and workable know-how you can use to improve your networking skills and grow your business. We always start the show with a quote. Today's quote is, "We won't have a society if we destroy the environment." And that is from Margaret Mead. With us today in the studio, we have someone who helps at helping protecting the environment. Her name, Janine Finnell. Hello, Janine.
Hey, Basil.
How are you?
I'm just doing well, thank you.
Okay, good. So glad to have you because that gives us the opportunity to talk about the environment. What can you tell us about it, protecting the environment?
Well, Basil, there's so much that needs to be done. One can almost get overwhelmed at times and throw up your hands and wonder what can you, as an individual, can really do. Much needs to be done, and while we can do things at the individual level, I think it's so necessary for us to network, connect with others, and see what we can do to change our society to move it in the right direction.
What is the biggest issue we have today in the environment? Is it the weather? Is it the pollution? Is it the trash? Is it what are the key major things that we're up against?
I thought you were going to keep going. There's so many. It does get very concerning. I'm taking a class right now on climate change science and technology, and it is interesting just to see how there are a lot of connections. You know, you mentioned climate and a concern about increasing carbon emissions. And then that can also impact the oceans and coral reefs and increasing acidification of the ocean as well. Just a lot of things to be concerned about. I don't know if you're familiar with the expression canaries in a coal mine. When miners, many years ago, the methane gas would build up and they would put canaries in a coal mine because canaries were much more sensitive. And if something happened to the canary, then they knew it was time to get out of the coal mine. So there are a lot of disturbing indicators that are kind of a barometer of things that are going awry. Are we going to be using any slides at all at some point or not? I had brought some slides. We don't necessarily have to use them.
Don't worry about it.
They will be running them, okay, because I did have some things listed if we want to get into that a little bit later about some specific indicators. But I think a lot of these are really interconnected, Basil. I think population is one concern that we have. Do you have any idea how many people we had living in our world in 1900?
I know we have 6 or 7 billion now.
Exactly,
And then how many did we have in 1900?
In 1900, there were about 1.5 billion people. So you can see that we've really increased our numbers in the last 100 years. And do you think in 1900 that they had refrigerators?
No, they didn't.
Do you think they had computers?
No, they didn't.
Do you think they had cars?
No, they didn't.
So when you look at just all the ways that we are consuming energy now, and we have such a substantial amount of population, and then because of the energy use and production, we are increasing carbon emissions, which have been implicated in climatic change, then I think we can say that humans are having some sort of a contribution.
Okay. What can we do? Because if looking at it, okay, the population just 5x or 4 or 5x, and the use of computer and cars and everything else came out. Okay, these are almost like irresistible, in a way, movement. What can be done to slow it down, or what can be done to protect the environment?
Thank you, Basil. That's an excellent question, and one that I've really grappled with myself as I have worked in this area for such a long time. I've been involved in the policy and research area and write a lot of reports, but that doesn't necessarily, in the long run, help too. We can plan a lot, but what are we really doing in terms of concrete actions? So, I had attended and actually spoke at a energy policy conference this week, and I thought it was interesting because one of the panelists was talking about how important it is that you can be an educated consumer in terms of knowing what light bulbs to buy and that sort of thing, but he says we really need to move to being activated consumers in terms of just really trying to make the changes that we can in our homes, in our societies. Case in point, active means that you're actually doing something and making a change, maybe rather than just reading a book or something like that. Maybe becoming an activated citizen, becoming more involved in politics, supporting perhaps people that are running for Congress that really feel that things need to be done and have more of an environmental awareness. One case in point, I belong to the Arlingtonians for a Clean Environment, and they've been doing a lot of wonderful things. And we actually had a 4-year project where we were educating people and having them certify their backyards as a sustainable wildlife habitat, because many birds, this is like a flyway, and they'll fly from Venezuela all the way to Washington and even further north, and they need a lot of energy. They don't have rest stops like we do on I-95 where they can pull in and get something to eat. They need green space, and we're destroying a lot of that. So people were saying, what can we do in our own backyards to help create more biodiversity and habitat? So I think that's one example. I work to make my own backyard a wildlife habitat in terms of growing more native plants, more wildlife-friendly plants, providing food, water, places to protect young, shelter for different species, pollinators, maybe a butterfly garden, that sort of thing. So I think to the extent that you can really try to be more active in making your moving forward on this issue, I think that would be a good thing. Otherwise, you just get overwhelmed and kind of throw up your hands. So whatever you can do in your own home, your own yard, if you do have a yard, even if you have an apartment building, maybe you could put out some plants that might attract bees and other, butterflies. That's a real critical issue right now that we're facing. We're not seeing as many butterflies as we have in the past, but if you can put out more plants to help the caterpillars that eventually become butterflies. You're looking at me kind of skeptically.
No, I'm not.
You don't garden, I take it?
Sorry? No,
you don't garden?
They won't let me. Let's put it out there. No, just kidding. No, I got it. I got it.
Does it make sense, or what do you think?
No, it makes sense. It makes sense, definitely.
Or is it too green like this room?
Well, this is not that green, folks, as you can see back here. Let me put it this way. This is the question I have. You may not have the answer to this question.
It could be possible, but
well, possible.
I do have a lot of notes and a lot of books, so we'll see what I can do.
Who is taking responsibility for this worldwide?
Wow. I just have to say one thing, Basil. You beat me to the punch, because I was going to talk about how we shape the world by the questions we ask, and I think you just did it in this interview. Oh my goodness, talk about stealing my thunder.
I apologize if I did.
That's wonderful. Gosh, one person that I've been profoundly struck by, and I had no idea we were going to discuss this in our conversation, was the Dalai Lama.
Interesting.
Because he seems to really just have a heightened awareness of all species, not just humans as well. And I really admire that. He just seems to be so highly evolved. I think he's really quite the advocate, although you wouldn't necessarily know that. He's very soft-spoken. But when you read a lot of his writings, I would say
he's the one.
He's kind of, yeah, an unsung hero when it comes to just his concern over all the creatures of the world and where are we going. And I think he's concerned about overpopulation because we end up taking more of the earth resources for one species, ourselves, and kind of push away other species as well. So thank you for that question, Basil. I'm having a good time.
So now, okay, I got
Oh, now you're just gearing up, okay.
No, it's the reason I have you on the show is because I'm very much interested and at the same time very much concerned.
Yes, yes.
About taking care of the environment. And that's why we got in with the quotes, the Margaret Mead.
Yes.
We need to take responsibility for the environment. My concern is that we're going at it, getting what we want and doing whatever we want and not thinking about the consequences of it.
Yes, that kind of segues into another point that I wanted to bring up. As I mentioned, I had been at an energy policy conference this week, and we were talking about many different technologies, and one thing that was interesting in terms of what you're talking about, reducing waste, was energy efficiency, and just what can we do to extract more work out of the energy that we're already using. And I just thought it was so phenomenal because Skip Leitner, who is a senior fellow for American Council for Energy Efficient Environment, has been doing a lot of research just showing the phenomenal progress that still can be made and the untapped potential through better energy efficiency measures in the United States and also around the world. In fact, he's working with the International Energy Agency right now that has done a ground-shaking, or has come up with a ground-shaking report on energy efficiency, saying that this should really be the first fuel that rather than first going to our supply fuels, you know, our fossils and other resources, that we really should see what can we extract first from energy efficiency. So it's really kind of interesting that he's saying by 2050 we could maybe use half the amount of energy that we're projected to use at that point if we can really better harness our energy efficiency technologies, LED lights, and we're moving towards that, the CAFE standards with the corporate automobile standards, where we're trying to get more mileage out of every mile per gallon that we drive. So I think we're going in the right direction, and so encouraging to hear some studies about just the phenomenal amount of strides we could make in the future in terms of not using as much so we don't waste as much. And if we don't use as much, then we won't have as much environmental degradation because we won't have to go to the Arctic and start drilling, which is kind of like giving whiskey to an alcoholic. You know, if you just keep giving more and more without using your resources more judiciously that you have right now, because we have many other generations. You know what? Children, grandchildren, the Iroquois have the expression of what? The 7 generations to follow. So I agree with you that we really do need to be more mindful, perhaps, of what we're doing as a society and as individuals.
You know, something that struck me is you have the sun, you have the air, those natural elements, you have the earth, which could be used more.
And as you were speaking, I was thinking solar, wind, geothermal resources. Yeah, boom, boom, boom. And just some phenomenal strides have been made in recent years, as you're probably aware of in terms of cost of materials coming down. In fact, let me tell you a story. It was interesting. I was in Ohio recently, which is where my family resides right now, my 93-year-old mother and 2 sisters. And I was traveling to Chicago and had a chance to travel through Ohio, through Warm County, and I saw more wind turbines than I ever saw in my life, more than even I've seen from photos of California. There are 210 wind turbines right at the Ohio-Indiana border, and I was struck because they were all in Ohio, and as soon as I crossed the border to Indiana, they weren't there. So, I mean, you could really see the evidence of the state policies for one state versus another. But I just, and this was like, what, less than a month ago, Basil? What a phenomenal experience. It was really very, very interesting. So I think we are moving in the right direction when it comes to harnessing more renewable energy technology and energy efficient technologies as well.
Could we be up against vested interest?
Ooh. Are you, well, I suppose you're referring more to the fossil energy economy, maybe the big oil companies, that sort of thing.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't make sense to me. 2-3 years back, we have this big situation with the Middle East and what have you, which went wherever it went. And at that point in time, you started hearing more about solar and everything else. And it was just like a fad. Now we're back to it. Now, now gas is what, $398, whatever? Coming close to $4, whatever, which, okay, maybe electric car could be used, and we don't hear more about it. I was yesterday at the Green Expo right here in Vienna.
Wonderful. Arlington's going to be tomorrow.
Yes. So I went and looked at it and like, this is another way to go.
Absolutely, Bazil. What you're talking about in terms of transportation is so critical. And in fact, I was at the Washington Auto Show in February and had a chance to see a lot of the new green technologies coming out there. I mean, it is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I'm going to touch your question on vested interests right now. I think I want to take it in more of a positive approach.
I'm just mentioning that, and I'll let you, the audience, chew on it.
Yeah, right. Let them chew on it and we welcome
do your own
responses.
Research. Yeah.
But one thing that's kind of fascinating to me is cars are increasingly becoming computers on wheels. And we're moving towards autonomous vehicles. In fact, several states have legislation out on this already. And I had a chance to actually test drive one of the Mercedes in terms of the simulation. It's only $120,000, but you know. And it was just amazing what technology can do, both safety-wise as well as with energy efficiency, where I had a chance to do a simulation and a pedestrian walked in front of me and the car automatically braked. And
now, let me ask you
phenomenal.
This. Yeah, it's remarkable.
So I love new technology.
No, it's good, and I'm all for it. Just to piggyback on your example, if it's coming, yes, a good thing. I guess it's better that the person does not get hit. Yeah, I guess that my question is answered.
Well, I know, and I wouldn't want to run them over.
Absolutely, I understand.
I wouldn't want that on my conscience.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally understand. no, it's a good thing. Get me right. So there's a lot of, for example, a car feels something in there and then it stopped and what have you. I just think that we need to speed up the process along those lines to protect the environment.
There's no doubt about it. It does take time. This last conference that I attended, we had some panelists, and one was from Toyota. And what was a little bit scary, Bazil, is he just talks about the long lead times to develop these technologies, that you almost need to do it 10 years in advance. So
maybe not. You know, there have been some situations here in that arena in others where because people wanted it, they went at it and made it happen.
True.
You get what I'm saying?
You know, the rate, you know, when we, Apollo, right, in terms of the moonshot.
Yeah.
No, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I've actually been reading this wonderful book. Gosh, it was about Franklin Roosevelt in World War II. I believe Doris Goodwin Kearns, the well-known historian, talking about how Roosevelt completely transformed the civilian economy into the defense economy for World War II. And could you imagine if we marshaled similar resources along the lines of what you're talking about to really say this is imperative, we can transform our economy, do it in a positive way, because if we don't grow our economy and people don't have jobs, that's not going to help the environment either, because I think you're going to have more tribal factions, maybe more people at loggerheads. But if we can all grow together in terms of a common purpose, then I think that would be a wonderful way to rally us as Americans, and eventually, hopefully, as all global citizens, because climate change is not just going to be handled in the United States. It's a global problem that we all have to do something about. So, no, I totally agree, but I wonder how we do that. How do we do that?
Well, it's a matter of, I guess, one of the things we have to understand, I think one of the barriers, if I may call it a barrier, don't ask me how to solve it necessarily, is increasing the awareness of people about it. I vividly remember when that crisis, oil crisis, was happening. There was elections coming, and they have this guy's big board, and then he has his name on it. Vote for me. Drill here. Drill now. Well, because I was trying to stay away from the Middle East. But I think it's to take a concerted effort. It takes, I guess, the reason I wanted to come to the show is it starts with education. If somebody's unaware of something, they ain't going to do anything about it.
And that's why I really appreciate you having me on this show, because maybe this show, just in its own small way, can help increase the awareness and knowledge with regard to these issues to help move things ahead. It's interesting, Bazil, because on the way over here, I was listening to Science Friday. I don't know if you're familiar with that show, but I really love it. And they were talking about games to help people fight cancer. That a lot of young people are familiar with gaming technology, and if you can play a game to fight the cancer in your body, that it can really make you feel like you can vanquish the enemy. And they've done actual empirical studies where people have done better as a result. And I thought, let's come up with some games maybe on the environment. That might be a nice educational tool to kind of engage people. And I have been involved in a sustainability green roundtable, just a little shout out to that group, where they've been looking at games for sustainable economies. And they brought in like maybe 50 energy, environmental, sustainability experts, and had us play games as if we were world leaders, and what would we be doing? Or if we were shop owners, what would we do in terms of installing more energy efficient equipment? So I just thought that was kind of an interesting idea in terms of getting back to just how so much is done now, online education, and but maybe games to make it more exciting and interesting rather than sort of scary, gloom,
orders,
and exactly.
I think it's a good idea. That may very well be the way to go.
Game of Thrones.
Absolutely.
My mic just fell down here. Game of Thrones, something like that. But speaking of that, there's a program out called Years of Living Dangerously, and it actually has Harrison Ford in it from Star Wars. Okay. Excellent program where he and other people are traveling around the world to look at parts such as Syria, where they think the civil war there may have really been caused by a drought. And because farmers could not farm as much and produce food, they became hungry. They asked the government for help, the government didn't give them help, so hungry people revolt. I mean, we saw that with the French Revolution. So they've had maps showing that Syria is really kind of in the epicenter of drought as we move forward with climate change predictions. And look what's happening in the West right now. I mean, of great concern in California. And indeed, I saw some statistic that 40% of the United States is impacted by drought. Much more severe in California, but I think we're seeing it. I think they said this is the worst it's ever been, like in 1,200 years of historical climatic records. At least that's what I was hearing in my class this morning. And that's pretty impactful. Kind of a wake-up call. I think climate change is invisible, and it's really hard to get a handle on what do you do if you can't really see it. I mean, if you have, like you said, maybe the Middle East and there's a dictatorship and you know that you have to change things there, that's one thing. But if it's just out in the open and sort of invisible, you're not really sure what to do. But I do have to just have a shout out for a person, and you can Google this on the internet. He has done time-lapse photography of icebergs. He calls it extreme ice, where you can actually see the icebergs, they call it calving, as they melt and break off and fall into the ocean. And the way he's done is he set this up around 30 glaciers and icebergs around the world and done time-lapse photography. And I just got chills watching that because I could actually see it. And like you said, if more people can become aware and actually see that, and if it can spur them into more positive action, and maybe unite us as a society.
Definitely. And while we have a few minutes left, I wanted you to have the opportunity, have the chance to have one of our guests at last breakfast event in Fairfax. Why don't you please give your opinion to the audience on that for a minute?
Bazil, thank you so much. I'm really glad that you told me about your breakfast networking event. It was my first time to attend, and I found it very worthwhile. As a matter of fact, you may be interested in knowing that I just had lunch with someone, I believe it was on Wednesday, in the energy cybersecurity space, because that's one of the things in the Leaders in Energy group that I am the clean ambassador for and founder of, is we look at many important energy issues and of course, our energy infrastructure and the safety of our energy and water infrastructure and many computerized systems. Very, very important in this age of what? The heartbleed virus and other things. So thank you for inviting me to the Breakfast Club. I just found it was a very nice way to connect. Actually sat next to someone, former IBM. Yeah, I was a former IBMer myself, so that was nice. And then I like your speed networking. Although I have to admit, I was really out of breath. By the end of it, it was kind of like I was glad when you said, okay, that's it. It was wonderful. You know, you have like 1 minute to talk about yourself and 1 minute to listen to the other person. So very, very interesting. I've heard about this with speed dating, so, but I had never done it for speed networking. Well, I've never done it for speed dating either. Don't want my husband to get all worried.
Thank you. Folks, what she's mentioning, you can avail yourself of it on our website every third Thursday of the month. And also want to squeeze in over here, we have a big expo coming on June 20 with 100 exhibitors, 400 to 500 business people join us. Thank you very much for coming on our show.
Thank you, Basil. It's been a wonderful pleasure, a delight.
I'm glad you like it. Hey, thank you very much for tuning in. We have a couple of books we'd like to put out over here for your further understanding and appreciation of the subject. And thank you very much for coming to our show. And I just want to mention that we're looking forward. For more information on our show, please visit our website, which is blnbc.com. Have a very productive day. Bye-bye.
This program was brought to you by Organo Gold. Organo Gold is a health and wellness company that provides healthy coffees, teas, and chocolate. All one has to do is consume the available coffee, teas, chocolate, and other products to get all the available benefits. One can also share these products with others to help them improve their health as well.